Recording in progress.
Right, and start again. Say, welcome everyone to our weekly call. So we don't have a theme for the call today. Just to explain to people that joined early, we've deferred the discussion on the standards tracker for the ITF by a few weeks. So I'll come back at the end just to confirm when that's been scheduled for. But that should feature a demo of the standards tracker, not just a presentation about it. So in the meantime, let's just talk through some of the recent developments. There's a few things which caught my eye this week. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just I will just mention a handful of them as we go through. So starting at the top, you may have seen that ICANN has proposed a .internal domain, which was covered on the register and elsewhere, and has provoked some discussion in various fora as to whether that's a good thing or not. Seems reasonably harmless to me, but others may feel differently about that.
Should have existed for years.
Yeah, why not? Would be yeah. Actually, that's a fair point, Ross. I wonder why. I mean, it's one of those things that seems reasonably obvious now, but why it hasn't been sort of wasn't created previously, rather than just having a sort of, as it says on the headline, 192.168.
Yeah. Well, and why so long, right? Internal is pretty long. Like, unfortunately, .int is already taken, but that would have been an excellent choice. But the other thing is, with all the name collision with .corp and .home that ICANN found with its studying, why not just make one of those, since it's already heavily in use? .corp would be kind of a natural candidate for that.
Yeah, well, I suppose in the consumer environment, they've created a few challenges, so they probably just wanted a generic one where the context didn't really matter. But
the name is less important than it is for there to be one. There certainly should be one.
Yeah. So anyway, there was a few comments on the register when that came out, amongst other places. Ralph, did you have a point on this one?
Yeah, I mean, no, it really doesn't matter what we choose there. I can assure you it will leak. There's no way you're not going to see that on the internet. So, I mean, I think choose anything is a fine and a good idea. But I mean, we'll see, as with other domains that have been tried for internal usages, we'll see them leak at some point.
Yeah, well, dare I say it, that's down to the coders to try and manage. But you're right. I guess nothing's foolproof. But at least there's be a bit more consistency of use, hopefully, going forward. Possibly one of the other ones which caught my eye was the decision by SIDN to move part of .nl onto AWS. And I'll say that cautiously. There was a comment on the Eddie email list from Paul Wouters, rightly pointing out that the headline about relocation of .nl domain names to Amazon is misleading, because the actual domain names aren't being located on AWS. It's, I think, some of the registry functions, as I understand it, that are, albeit given that will mean potentially that there's personal information stored on AWS, that may itself be a cause of concern for some, if you're familiar with the Cloud Act and FISA 702. But that's a different issue to what the headline suggests. Ralph, did you have is that a legacy hand, or do you have something on that one?
No. I mean, on this, I mean, the headline is misleading, but when you look at what have been the most successful attacks kind of on domain takeovers, they're kind of registry attacks. So I'm not sure if it makes it better or worse. I mean, it's none of my business, but I think I mean, for TLD to do that, that is sort of, I mean, has the mandate from the government to run it. It's a bit of a weird move.
Yeah. And I should say, I've personally got absolutely no issues with AWS, not least of which, actually, I see, Brett, you've raised your hand. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, it's just, well, first of all, I've got no insider knowledge at all, so I can't talk about this authoritatively. I knew nothing about it until I saw the news the other day. But I think a couple of things I wanted to raise. I mean, first of all, I guess I don't think I disagree with what Ralph just said. However, I will say they're not the first ones. As far as I know, Belgium put theirs into AWS at least 2 or 3 years ago. And I believe some others are as well. So I think there is some precedent, whether that's a good precedent or a bad precedent, who knows? I don't think there's been any major problems or outages of any other country code top level domain that's already put it into AWS. One of the things I did notice is there seemed to be a lot of rhetoric when I was reading some of the comments on LinkedIn about this, that it's terrible because they're putting in AWS. That means, you know, the sovereignty is gone, all the data's in the US, etc., etc. And obviously AWS has a lot of things built into it, so you can make sure the data stays in certain places. And I know that AWS are currently building something called the EU Sovereign Cloud, where it's a completely separate region that has lots of EU data constraints around it. So I think there are obviously good points and bad points to this, but I think in the interesting thing, I think, is probably the conversation between the Dutch government and the Dutch registry, which I think is not something I've seen before. So obviously, like I said, I think I've seen other CCTLDs do it, but I've not seen the same level of conversation between the government and the registry.
Yeah, fair point. Maybe it was just a quiet news day and they were unlucky that it picked up a few comments. I mean, to be honest, I think maybe the challenge they could have, and I completely accept all your points about the sort of the European sort of variant of AWS. You know, those of us that track some of the legislation, if you look at things like the Cloud Act, whether that presents any protections in terms of data access, I think is questionable. But that's not a criticism of AWS. You could apply the same comments to, I don't know, TikTok and the separation of its operations in the US and whether that protects it from the requirements of the Chinese government and so on. There is a lot of jurisdiction overreach in some of these areas. But that's absolutely not a technical sort of concern. That's more a legislative question. The other sort of couple, I mean, in fact, both these on this page are also ones that were really interesting for different reasons. Colleagues at Akamai put together a blog post about web scraping. And one of the issues they sort of did some analysis on, and I found it really interesting, well worth a look if you have the time, is the amount of traffic that can be generated by web scrapers. And there was quite a lot of variation, in fairness, depending on the nature of the site that was being scraped. But in some cases, it was sort of 75% plus of the traffic, so it was really quite considerable on some sites. So as I thought it was really interesting analysis that had been undertaken. Just what impact sort of dumb web scraping can have on the sort of level of traffic traversing the internet. Sort of not a topic I've really seen covered much previously, so good to see that being looked at. And it's part one of presumably at least 2 posts, so I can't remember if how the topic was to be developed, but yeah, this one has some interesting data in it. And then the other one, just running through the slide, DNS filter looked at the use of generative AI and some of the security risks posed by so generative AI. It's a good topic to be sort of covered, you know, certainly topical, obviously, but actually it's good that people are starting to look at the implications of the use of generative AI, and particularly the so-called hallucinations, because clearly in the sort of in the realms of security, hallucinations could be significantly harmful. So the fact that people start to give some thought in that general area, I think, is really very encouraging, if not slightly alarming as well. But so good also to see that topic being covered. You can see I had a quiet weekend this weekend, clearly. Moving on, I'm not going to dwell on all of these, but there's some sort of a useful post from Infoblox on securing DNS and DHCP. May be of interest to some of you. Also, I just noticed something on that was sort of looking at the relative merits of different privacy browser extensions. It was titled for Chrome and Firefox, bizarrely, but actually it covered a handful of browsers, so not just the sort of Chrome-based ones, of which it certainly mentioned Edge and I think Brave, if I remember rightly, but also directly sort of looked at Safari as well. So it was more than just those two browsers. Looking at some of the different capabilities of some of the different extensions. It also looked at productivity extensions, but they were somewhat more diverse in their nature, whereas the privacy ones were quite useful. The last one I mentioned on this slide, as we were talking about it just before the start of the call, obviously with the Vision Pro now being available in retail, if you have a spare, well, I think it's actually $4,500 when you include the battery pack and various other add-ons. Yeah, if you've got some loose change burning a hole in your pocket, yeah, they are now being sold in Apple stores. There'll be some really weird sort of pictures, as we were discussing before the start of the call, of people driving, wearing them, and various other things. But I was intrigued to see some coverage of some of the privacy implications of what's being collected. Quite significant about amount of data, about what your eyes are doing, but also not just of the user, but also of what and who is around them. So it does raise a lot of sort of privacy considerations, let's say, to put it slightly less pejoratively than the heading of the particular post that I picked up. Those of us that remember Google Glass, sort of not dissimilar, but obviously it's somewhat more sophisticated than Google Glass was, given that they didn't have anything like the same sort of capability of the Vision Pro. So I think that's a topic that's going to come back a lot in the same way it did with Glass, but with a lot more dimensions to it as people start to understand the volume of data that's being collected by the devices, whether you own and use one yourself, if you happen to be around someone that's actually using it. So no doubt that will crop up a lot more. Then just some other unrelated stuff. I don't know how many of you would have caught the hearing in Congress last Wednesday, which made for quite interesting, quite captivating watching. Not so much for any of the people that were involved. I think it was it half a dozen people, but when one of the senators kicked off by basically saying to Mark Zuckerberg that he had blood on his hands, that was sort of setting the tone for the hearing. But yeah, I found it really interesting watching, and was quite impressed at the knowledge level of some of the senators, and also some of the issues that they surfaced, such as if you do a search on, I think it was Instagram, it apparently it can come back to warn you that some of the items you've searched for may contain child sex abuse material, but it gives you the option whether you wish to continue anyway. Which certainly in some jurisdictions that would be, I think, illegal. If you viewed something which turned out to be child sex abuse material, certainly in the UK, I believe a fair number of other jurisdictions as well. So yeah, interesting viewing. If you've not caught up with that, and there was quite a lot of obviously press coverage afterwards. A few other things, again, I won't go obviously through all of these, you can read through them at your leisure if you're so interested, but the European Union has sort of got agreement on the sort of content of its new AI Act. So that was probably one of the other noteworthy things from the last week or so. And then just a reminder in terms of some sort of pending deadlines. One, just for those of you in the consultancy space, for the Internet Governance Forum, they're advertising for a consultant to support the policy network on AI over the next few months, but you need to respond by close of today. I didn't check how it defines close of today, probably 23:59 UTC, but do check that if that's of interest. I thought that was just worth mentioning. And then for a reminder also for any of us in Charlotte for the OARC meeting on Thursday, Friday, if you're thinking of putting forward a lightning talk, with a reminder that you have to be present in person to deliver a lightning talk, then the deadline to put forward a proposal is the 8th, so that's a Thursday. But obviously, if you leave it to then, you may find that the slots are already full. So if you're contemplating potentially giving a lightning talk sort of sooner rather than later, would be a good plan. I'm assuming, as I've not seen anything to say differently, that the slots aren't all currently allocated, but if anyone from the programme committee knows differently, please shout out. And then we've got a few other sort of deadlines coming up for the Southeast Europe satellite event linked to Eurodig. You've got till next week to put forward any proposed presentations for that, and also if you want to apply to participate in YouthDig, I think the upper age limit is 30, I think, then you got till the 14th to apply. I've obviously already put my application in for that, but it'd be good to see a few other friendly faces participating. And I mean, yeah, we've got various other things coming up over the next sort of number of weeks, but you've got a bit more time for those, so I won't mention those here now. Okay, and then in terms of events, since I mentioned at least a handful of times already, OARC 42 takes place this Thursday and Friday. And if you've been watching your emails in the last hour or so, I think thanks to the social sponsor, there is a social event on the Thursday evening, and the details came out, as I say, within the last hour, that it's going to be Thursday evening at Fahrenheit CLT, which is apparently a 4-minute walk from the venue hotel. but you do need to register in advance for that. So look in your inbox if you're going in person, and sort of register. So you've got there's no cost to attend unless you've got a +1, in which case there is a cost for a second ticket. But if you're registered for the event, there's no additional cost for you to attend the social, but you have to pre-register. Is it by tomorrow, I think? So check your email, and if there's nothing in your inbox, just reach out to the OARC team to let them know to send something through. And then, yeah, we've got a whole series of things coming up over the next few months. Not that far till the ITF 119 in Brisbane. I think for OARC, there's 80 odd people in person, about 130 altogether. When I last looked for ITF 119, it was attempt to say, was it 500, getting on for 500 registered in person so far, and a total of about 700 inclusive of remote participants. So numbers building for both of those, but plenty of other events coming up as well. Then finally from me, we'll do some highlights from the OARC meeting on the call next week for those of you that aren't able to participate. But if you are participating, feel free to join the call and share your thoughts as well, please. Then we haven't yet confirmed if we've got a theme presentation for the 19th, but at the end of the month we've got a presentation on some of the practicalities of sort of DNSSEC and what's stopping wider deployment, which is just sort of reprising a presentation from the last RIPE meeting, but with more time for discussion, because I thought it was a really interesting presentation. And then the ITF Internet Standards Tracker that was been tentatively sort of penciled for today, you'll see that's been rescheduled to the 4th of March. So Carolina from the DNS Research Federation will join us, I think possibly with a colleague, to sort of just give us an update on the tool, where it is, and potentially a demo as well, which would be really interesting. And you'll see various other things over the next couple of months on the schedule. Haven't quite put a date against it yet, but we've already got one volunteer to talk about the multi-signer model, and a suggested second person. So as Ralph's on the call, I've suggested Ralph to talk to you also about that. So I'll be catching up with you in Charlotte at some point to see if you'll be interested in perhaps doing something jointly on that particular topic, given your expertise on it. But we can have that conversation then. So you've got a chance to think about why it shouldn't be you if you're not keen. And I think that is pretty much it for me. Yes, it is. So let me stop sharing my screen so people can see me. I see, Ralph, you've raised your hand, so feel free to unmute.
Yeah, so I think about that multi-signer stuff, but what I want to say is that in before DNS OARC, there on Wednesday also is a hackathon on a new proposed DNS record type called DELEC. It's kind of a continuation on the stuff we worked at the ITF in Prague, and if people are interested in kind of evolving DNS with new stuff like encrypted transport or other, stuff, then they're welcome to come there. We have a room. Just find me, or probably ask at the reception where it is, and we'll discuss lots of interesting stuff there.
Yeah, good. Actually, a good reminder of that, Ralph, because I think the interim DNS Ops working group session from a week or so ago, Deleg, I think, easily filled the allotted time. So there's clearly lots to discuss on that. Yeah, an active topic, and good to take advantage of people gathering in Charlotte to take part. Has anyone given any thought to remote participation in that, Ralph? Or
no, we'll just have a room, and people are there can I mean, it is hard because we have not kind of structured what we're going to work. It also depends a bit on who is coming there. So having that remote is kind of like a bit challenging.
Yeah, fair point. Okay. All right, good prompt, though. Thank you for mentioning that. So let me open up then, just following Ralph's lead, to see if anyone else has got anything else you wish to raise, not necessarily linked to anything we just discussed, but any other business that you would like to highlight. And if you have, pop it in the chat if that's easier for you, or just follow Nigel's lead and raise your virtual hand and jump in. So Nigel, over to you first.
This is thank you so much, Andrew. And this is difficult. The government always likes to get the first word in. I suppose there's no comment. No, I mean, probably a bit tangential to everyone's interest, but last week there were council working groups at the in ITU. So we have council working groups on a number of issues, but the one that is most of interest is the Internet Public Policy Council Working Group. And one of the exciting things that they had to decide on last week is what to have a public consultation on, which is always interesting because some countries always want something quite technical and detailed and problematic, and we always want something on, like the price of oranges or something, which is, it's not too controversial. But anyway, the UK did put forward a proposal to have one on universal acceptance and sort of multilingual internet, and that was accepted in a various forms. So there will be a public consultation on universal acceptance, which I think could be quite interesting for the ITU to, or for member states to at least appreciate that in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Hit into that separately, Nigel, and see if there's details on any other topics that have been added to a list for public consultation, but because I hadn't seen that. That's really interesting. And I think I remember from the DNS Research Federation, they did indicate that universal acceptance was less widely adopted, if that's the right phrase, than block name naming schemes, sort of blockchain naming schemes even, which is pretty poor when you come to think about it in terms of how well that's done. So yeah, good to see that included on a list of things for consultation, at least, because there's a lot more to be done in that general area. Okay, thanks, Nigel. Anyone else with anything else that you wish to raise this week? Not seeing anyone typing currently, although I can see Alicia agrees that was a good thing, Nigel. So good, you got support from Nominate at least, which is I'm not sure what most welcome. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. In which case, let's draw a line there, say thank you all for your time and participation, and really looking forward to seeing some people in person for a change in Charlotte. I think I'm there Tuesday evening, so no doubt see some of you on Wednesday, and some more people on Thursday as well. So look forward to seeing you all then. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, and catch up with you this time next week when we talk about the highlights of the OAuth meeting and take your views. Bye all.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.